Good evening and welcome to our first members Q&A event. And it's my pleasure to welcome you to tonight's event. I'm sure most of our members know who I am. Graham McKenzie, the Artistic Director of hcmf. And it's lovely to be presenting this Q&A with Aaron Holloway-Nahum from Riot Ensemble and all the composers who took part in the Zeitgeist Commissions for the festival in November, which I hope you very much enjoyed. So we have with us Anna Appleby, we have Hannah Kendall, Tonia Ko, who's joined us from all the way from Hawaii, I believe. Matthew Grouse, who's in Denmark, Auclair, and Heloise Tunstall-Behrens are all our Zeitgeist composers, and I'm immensely grateful for them all showing up tonight to take part in this event. And also to say the Zeitgeist Commissions are back on our website this month, where they'll remain. So if you haven't watched them for a while, then they're there for you to have another look at. And I'm sure that the conversation tonight will whet your appetite. So I am going to disappear from the screen, and I'm going to pass over to Aaron, who will host and facilitate tonight's Q&A. So thank you all for again for coming, and enjoy the event. Thank you.
Thanks, Graham. So hi everyone and welcome. It's night. Well, we don't really see you, but it's nice to be with you. I see all the composers here, this group of composers that we've never yet had in a room together, but whose music we've kind of gathered around a few times now over the past year, and it's really a pleasure to be here. And I'm excited to chat to the composers. I think it's nice to begin because probably while you might know Graham, maybe you know me, since Riot has had the opportunity to perform a few times now at Huddersfield over the last 5 years, but you might not yet know all of these composers. So I thought we just go around and begin. Composers could just give us a kind of, look, let's say 60-second, and in the spirit of a commission, no longer than 3 minutes then, composers, introduction to who you are and your work. Absolutely unfair and unbelievable that Tonia is zooming in from Hawaii. So I think we're going to begin with her. Let's put her on the spot and make her pay for that, huh?
All right, I guess that's fair. My name is Tonia Ko. I'm from Honolulu, Hawaii, and that's why I'm here. I'm back visiting family. Regularly, I live in London. I moved there almost 2 years ago. And I also work as a lecturer in composition at Royal Holloway University. So I am teaching in the middle of the night. So that's my payback. In my music, I'm very interested in physical movement and texture and blending little noises with more harmonic and melodic textures. My piece for the Zeitgeist Commissions was called Soothe a Tooth, and it was written for viola Stephen Upshaw.
All right. Thank you. So have I been saying it wrong this whole time? This is a great question. I've been saying Tonia. Tonia?
Tonia, like tones.
Tonia, okay.
Tones with Tonia.
All right, and I've been correcting people. I mean, I have been spreading vicious lies about your name, not lying about
Everyone
that.
says something a little bit different, so it's okay.
Okay, Tonia, now I know, All right, Matthew, you're next on my screen, so.
Sure. So I'm originally from North Yorkshire, and I'm currently living in Denmark, where I'm studying my master's in Aarhus. My music is, I guess recently I could pin it down to combining acoustic sound with electronic sound, text, video, and performative ideas. And recently I've worked with some kind of unusual technologies. So I just finished a piece for a thing called a Rubens tube, which is like a fiery tube that spits individual flames, and it responds to different frequencies. So I was sending like sine tones into it, and it can visualize those sine tones. So I'm kind of looking for those intersections between music and visuality and text.
Sorry, I just have to. So you're visualizing sine tones with fire.
Yep.
Okay. All right. Well, nice. I look forward to seeing that. Heloise, you're next on my screen.
Hiya. I'm kind of based both in Cornwall and London at the minute, and I've just finished my master's at Trinity Laban, and yeah, I suppose I'm interested in non-human life and finding a way to translate that through sound. I'm really interested in kind of performative combination of sound and movement and kind of the body within the music. And yeah, I think my investigation starts with looking at frequencies, and yeah, I'm very intrigued about collective behavior. So kind of many things like coming together and acting as one. Yeah.
Thanks very much. All right, Hannah.
Hello. Hi. I'm Hannah Kendall. I am originally from London. I'm in London at the moment, but I actually live in New York. And I have, I live there because I have a doctoral fellowship in composition at Columbia University. So I am also teaching into the middle of the night as well at the moment. So I feel you. And I am interested, most interested at the moment in creolizing my music, or figuring out how to creolize Western classical instruments, mostly to somehow blend together my African Caribbean heritage with writing very much within the Western classical idiom. I'm working on an opera at the moment, and so I think a lot of my pieces are becoming sort of mini music theatre works, which I think very much came through in Louise's incredible performance of Tuxedo, Hot Summer, No Water.
Yeah, definitely. Certainly a lot of theater in that piece. Okay, thank you very much. And Tonia Auclair. Now, Tonia, would you like me to refer to you as Auclair tonight, or is Tonia better? Which one? What's the way forward? I never know.
I think, yeah, for tonight, just for tonight, you can call me Tanya.
Okay, I won't call you Tonia, so at least that's.
Hi everyone. I make music and sounds under Auclair. I made the piece Monganije as a transformer. It was my first time writing for bass clarinet for Ausias Garagos Morant. I worked with him and I worked with my mother, and we drew on a story from her childhood as a refugee from the genocide in Rwanda in the 60s. And I guess it's I was really excited about writing for this instrument and working with my mother's voice. A lot of my work focuses on rhythm and voices, predominantly in kind of vocal ensembles and groups and choirs. And I'm exploring more and more of the stories within my family and within my DNA, I guess. So the year before, I did a residency with Ngoma Shah, who were an all-women drumming ensemble in Rwanda, who are pushing forward with a lot of the kind of traditional rhythm patterns and reviving that practice and tradition that was nearly obliterated by the genocide. So I'm really excited about exploring more of that rhythm language, working more with voice, also like finding interesting ways of translating ideas through sound. Yeah.
Thanks so much, Tonia, and I'm sure we'll hear more about that soon. Okay, last up, definitely not least, Anna Appleby.
Hi everyone, I'm Anna Appleby. I'm from Newcastle upon Tyne. As you can probably hear, I lost my Geordie accent in a tragic collision with the South Manchester, and yeah, I'm doing a PhD at the Royal Northern College of Music, which is to make an opera with poet Niall Campbell for premiere by the BBC Philharmonic and RNCM Singers. As you might imagine, in a pandemic, this has been somewhat delayed, but it is still going ahead, and I'm just great having going on. Primarily in my work, I collaborate. I like to work with people. I love people's ideas. If I sit in a room by myself,
Is it so now? So now's the classic Zoom question. I'm sorry to jump in, Anna, but this classic Zoom question: is it my internet going, or are we all having a little difficulty hearing Anna right now?
Yeah, I am as well.
So Anna, I don't know if there's a way to move closer to a router or end a worldwide pandemic so we can do this in person.
My internet
might be, I'm afraid.
I can't really move right now.
Okay.
I'm so sorry. Has it got there?
Well, we just lost your video. Maybe try speaking now. Now I don't hear you at all. Yeah, this is always good fun. Oh, sort of back. Try one more time, Anna.
Yeah, I'm so sorry.
Don't worry, it has to happen. It's a classic part of the experience.
I'm so sorry. Yeah, so I'm currently becoming a robot through this Zoom interaction, but apart from that, I love people as well as robots, and I tend to work with people in opera, and I loved working with Amy Green.
Great. Thanks so much, Anna. I can't even tell if I cut you off there, but
it goes again.
Okay. Yeah, very sorry if I spoke over you there, but it was silence here, so I apologize. So a reminder to all the HCMF members who are attending that we have a Q&A thing open here, which right now at the moment looks a little sad, no answered or open questions. So please feel free, if you come up with questions, to drop them in there. From what Anna just said, I'm already well, I mean, I think one of the classic questions or one of the interesting things to be talking about as composers right now is this question of working with people. I mean, composition is already such a solitary activity, and the last year has maybe made it worse. I'm not sure. But I'm interested in asking the composers about the way that they approach that in writing these solo pieces, in particular in this year, because it wasn't really possible to get in a room with any of our performers. It wasn't really possible to get up close and collaborate. You know, we had composers there talking about, wanting to get different ideas and having this kind of feedback. And I thought I might start actually back with you, Tonia, about working with Stephen, because I think, you mentioned physical movement and texture and sound, all these things being so important. And how did you translate that into your piece? Did you work with Stephen? Were you able to get files from him? What was that process like for you?
So Stephen and I met only once, and it was after a Riot Ensemble concert. And we chatted for a bit. we're both American, so we sort of hit it off quickly. And I only remember that he's like really, really tall and I'm really, really short. But yeah, it was a fun chat. And so when I had this opportunity to write for him, we did chat a little bit before I started writing, but because I did grow up as, well, I'm like a secret ex-violist, as many composers are. I played for a few years.
Surprising
in middle
number,
school.
yeah.
I had a bit of that background kind of at play, but mostly I was just riffing off of my recent experience being in lockdown and learning to play the ukulele, which is, the instrument, and I never learned to play. So I thought, I ordered myself an ukulele in London, learning to play, and of course not really knowing how, all the specific chords, and that I didn't really learn the correct way. And so I started making sounds with the bitones, like tapping on the fingerboard.
Can you just, sorry, Tonia, can you just explain what a bitone is?
Oh, so on any string instrument, if you tap any pitch, then you'd probably hear the pitch that the fingering should result in. But if you press harder, if you kind of hammer the fingerboard down, you start to hear the note on the other side of your finger as well. So both sides of the string would ring. So I kind of use that as a starting motif, I guess, in Soothe the Tooth.
Might be interesting just here for people listening. And here we have Tonia's piece, and this is how she notates that effect. So here you can see she just writes bitones and asks, well, this, am I right? This is where he places the finger, where he really smashes the finger down.
And the Roman numerals are showing what string to play on.
And did you work out like really carefully the other pitch that was resulting as well?
No, I actually, that was where I worked with Stephen after I had written, sort of what I imagined would potentially work. Then we went through and said, okay, it works really well on these notes and less well, like how what's the gradation of pressure to put on the string. That sort of thing was part of our collaboration.
Great. I might move to a less, well, I don't want to say less conventional, but Heloise, as I mentioned to you, I haven't even seen your score yet because Heloise actually did work directly with Adam, and Adam being at the RNCM, his piece was filmed up there and not at King's Place where we recorded 4 of the others. And so I don't actually know how a number of these things were notated. I don't know how many of our members will have seen Heloise's piece, but Adam does things like putting on numerous shirts and making different physical gestures, and it kind of appears in the piece at the beginning like this. And I'm just interested, before we look at the score, maybe we will pull it up, maybe not, but maybe you could tell us a bit, how did you work with Adam on those things? Did he send you like test video recordings? Because it's a very powerful performance he gives. I think you yourself are an actress as well. I might be making that up, but no.
No, I'm not an actress, but I was very taken by Adam's very performative approach when he plays. I mean, I don't know if you've seen his birthday series on YouTube.
He's written me one.
Has he? Amazing. I know. I feel like it would be such a great thing to just send someone instead of a birthday card, just like specialized version. But yeah, so I don't know. I thought I'd present some of these challenges to him of these movements, but they're all kind of derived from this idea of a tree growing and the different stages of the growth in the tree. And in a way, he's becoming the tree, or he is the tree in this piece growing. And I actually asked him to go to the park and just spend some time with the tree and kind of think about some of the processes that it will be going under in its life, and to bring that to the performance. So in the score, I kind of notated places where he should do a movement, but I didn't say exactly what that was. And yeah, there was one rehearsal we had together where he showed me what he'd come up with, and I was just amazed.
So maybe, so here we are looking at the score. Probably we can, okay, so put on t-shirt, that's pretty obvious.
Yeah, so these are the kind of, the rings of the tree gradually increasing.
Okay, and is it this line? So this is a kind of like, this is an action, this is something he
Yeah,
has to
those
do?
are the action, yeah, and those, that symbol is where he does a movement, but it's not specified what it is, and I kind of like that being open within the score. So it's kind of a process of him embodying the tree and its dynamics, but also, it could be specific, like if anyone else was to perform it, they could do it specifically for them.
Yeah. That's interesting. I think that's a nice segue actually over to Matthew, because Matthew, you wrote a piece which I think would be it'd be pretty hard to imagine any other percussionist performing it. I don't know if that's a possibility. Yeah. Certainly not spending the 4 days after the recording editing the video. Could you tell us a bit about the piece, how it was working with Sam, how you arrived at the idea, and maybe some relationship to that?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think the first important thing to say is it's definitely not a piece by me for Sam. It was really from the get-go a piece that we both developed together. I think like in the first 20 minutes of the chat that we had when we were paired up, it was evident that we had some quite similar interests. So maybe exploring kind of obsessive behaviors in our everyday lives. That's something I've done a lot, and also something that Sam was keen to explore. And he also was just really generous in offering up things he'd be interested in making work about, which is something I've not necessarily had a lot in the past. It's probably more about me not asking enough. So in this case, I said, what would you like to make a piece about? And I don't know if I want to spoil it too much if people haven't seen the piece, but one of the things that he said he really wanted to bring in the piece was this idea of the board game Risk and his growing addiction over lockdown to that. And that finds its way in a kind of unusual way. But the collaboration was, it was incredible, really. I think we developed quite a friendship over the period of writing the piece. And I feel quite lucky to have had a process like that. It was like nothing else I really have had in working with performers. That's not to diss other performers or anything. But yeah,
Sam is
special.
I mean,
yeah.
I feel that way about every single one of my players, but Sam is very special. I think Sam has had at some point in this year about 3 different Zeitgeist Commissions, but the problem is that every single one of them spirals. So I give him a composer and he goes away and comes back and he's like, all right, well, actually we need about 45,000 pounds in 3 years, and I need to go to France 6 times, and we need a video artist, and I have to like learn how to swim in open water in a river. And I'm like, that's great, but none of that can happen right now. So, but I'm really glad that your piece came through. That thing about a new experience and writing in a new way. I mean, Tonia, you already struck on that as well. This is your first time writing for bass clarinet. I actually got a little insight into your piece at the beginning because I was able to help out a little bit in kind of transcribing the recording of your mother using some computer software to give you a starting point. But it was it was extraordinary to start with that recording and then hear. I mean, I didn't hear anything then until the very finished piece. So maybe you could tell us a little bit about what it was like working with Alcius and how the piece developed. I'm particularly interested in how his input changed what you were imagining at the beginning.
Yeah. Well, I guess so. The whole piece started with some conversations over WhatsApp video calls with my mum. And when I got the commission, I knew very quickly that I wanted to work with her voice. And I knew I wanted, and I just had this feeling about the bass clarinet. I'd seen it played a lot and was like really intrigued by it. And I realized that there's this kind of interesting connection between the human voice and bass clarinet. and in terms of its intonation and it being like breath generated and stuff. So I was excited about what might happen when I put these things together, and then like what would happen when that combination, like what that would do in the retelling or this reimagining of my mother's story, and how it might retell it in different ways or new ways. So it started with recordings of conversations between us, and I edited those down, gave them to Auclair, and much like Matthew was saying, like within the first like 20 minutes of chatting, there was just a vibe, and we were just like, it was really lovely. It just, he immediately got where I was coming from, because on one level I really wanted to explore the inherent musicality inside my Ma's voice, and to like kind of dive into that and then like explode that out. But I also wanted to work with the story too, and the events that happen. So there's like several things. There's like the rhythms, there's the melody within her voice, and then the story itself. But then also I'm really, whenever I work with another artist, I'm really excited about going on a journey with them and their relationship to their instrument, whatever that might be, or their art form. So I really wanted to get to know how Auclair is like, how Auclair connects with his instrument. And at first that was quite tricky because of the distance, and he's up in Liverpool, I'm in London. So initially we were working very much with Ma's voice, and it was wild. Like after the first like video call we did, I explained to him kind of loosely, gave him a loose idea of the ideas I wanted to explore with him, and how I was excited about kind of all of the multiphonics and the way that kind of splits the note apart and all this stuff. And I was like really interested in hearing what would happen if we could translate my mum's voice into melody. And then an hour later, he sends me a voice memo, and he like by ear, he'd like listen to her voice and played me back the melody of my Ma's voice in like an hour later. And I was just like, and I was like, yes, this is it. This is the beginning. This is the beginning. Let's dig deeper. So it's just a process of that. And we did a lot of chat, talking, sharing ideas backwards and forwards. And I had some I like working visually. So I sent him some diagrams and stuff, and started to map out how I imagined the piece, and where the points at which we could explode out from her voice and follow the melody, and then move away from it. And luckily, actually, the regulations shifted, so I was able to go up for a day to Liverpool and spend a day with him. And then we took the piece apart chapter by chapter and explored lots of stuff sonically in the same room with each other, and that like again brought so much. I went away with so many, just felt really enriched by seeing him play and physically being in the space with him, and being able to say, oh, what happens when we do this, and oh, what if we shift that, like all the funny little accidental things as well that come out of just being in the same room with somebody, interacting with their own instrument. And so that very quickly within that day we'd set it, and then after that I did lots of tweaking and stuff, and we'd send those notes back to him. But yeah, it's remarkable what we were able to do kind of in the space of a day.
Yeah.
Obviously with lots of groundwork and research and stuff.
Yeah.
But it was incredibly joyful experience. And I think with this piece in particular, the story is one of resilience and transformation, but it also is very painful. And I think Auclair was an incredible collaborator, because he was able to hold space for all of those things and be really open and generous in the ways that he brought his energy to it and responded to it. So yeah, it was brilliant, really, really one of a kind. Much like Matthew, I hadn't had an experience. It's always different with every collaboration, but it was also the first time that I was working with so explicitly with material that's so personal to my family in quite a public way. So yeah.
I'm very happy to hear that. I think most composers find working with Riot to be a pretty unique experience when they get to do it. I'm glad and excited that the solo opportunities are being described that way too. I know that the performers, if they could be here, would all say that they loved working with each of you too. Tonia, you just gave a kind of great answer actually to a second question that came in from McPeak about meeting the performers face to face and how that experience was different compared to digital meetings. I might just though roll back to Mick's first question here as I turn to Hannah, because Hannah is a composer. I mean, all of our composers have big careers and have pieces being played all over. But Hannah, right now, I'm seeing like, here's an orchestral piece in, I don't know, it's like in Cologne, and here's this big piece happening here, and here's this big piece happening here, and here's that happening there. And I think it's quite an interesting thing then to turn to you and ask. I mean, I don't think that you actually were able to get in a room with Louise and work on the piece. And in fact, it's a piece that I think that you delivered. I mean, maybe there was some back and forth, but a lot of it was you writing, this is my cello piece, and here you go. But I'm really interested. Mick asks, how can you guys see these questions, by the way? I don't know if I'm the only one that can see them. So how you think the exigencies, I have to admit I looked this word up. So the kind of like enforced requirements of lockdown will impact on composition and performance in the long term. So just in case our members can't see those questions, I'll just summarize it again and just say, the question is basically to our composers, how do you think that the enforced aspects of working now, so everything from social distancing to not really being able to get in a room with someone to, you have to send your piece and attend a rehearsal via Zoom, how will those things impact on composition and performance in the long term? And I was particularly directing that to Hannah to begin with, but of course, any of our composers are free to rudely jump in at any point.
Well, I think I'm enjoying the challenge, to be honest, because I think that it's mixing things up, and I think new and interesting results will come due to that. And I suppose not only with regards to the compositional process itself, but with just a general shake-up in the industry in general. And I'm excited about how these external factors might make shifts and changes, some of them that are very much needed and welcome. With, more specifically to do with the piece, you're right, that I pretty much worked in a way that I would ordinarily. And I think that's mostly because of the distance, especially because when I started thinking about the piece, I was still in New York, and Louise and I were pretty much back and forth by email. But compositionally, I love this piece because it gave me the freedom to do new things in a way that I, probably wouldn't have been able to before. And I think that's not only because of the incredible open nature of Riot Ensemble and the musicians themselves, but the fact that, in this current climate, I feel as though I can take more risks because there isn't, especially I suppose with orchestral works where everything has to be perfect because you have half an hour to rehearse and then it's performed once and boom, that's it, and that's sort of the way in which I've been working for so long. But because of lockdown and the way in which these pieces are coming together and the way that they're being presented, it feels as though not necessarily there's room for error, but there's room to experiment and explore. And I really loved that about the process. And, asking Louise, how comfortable she was with, vocalizations, and not only just focusing on playing the cello incredibly well, which she does do, but doing you know, working with auxiliary instruments and, you know, just pushing things a bit. And I suppose that's one thing that I found out of the lockdown process and this general new way that we're having to work. So
that's great. Yeah, I mean, just so again our members have a sense of what's going on there, I might again just share Hannah's score briefly, and just put this is the very opening of Hannah's beautiful piece where Louise picks up a music box, and in the video she actually, I mean, to her it was very important. When I made the first edit of this piece, the music box kind of started under all the ident things, and she wrote me back a very serious email about how it was really a part of the piece, that it starts when she picks that up. And I assume, I might be wrong, this really is an assumption, that it was a specific music box you sent her, like she didn't just find any music box, right? It says the piece is definitely.
Yeah, so I sent the specific music box, which is the 30-note music box, and I personally transcribed the recitative from Handel's Messiah. Then shall the eyes of the blind be opened, because that process of transcribing the melody itself is important for me as part of this work. And you know, sort of going beyond the whole reason behind I'm using music boxes a lot at the moment. I don't know if anyone's interested, but I'll tell you why, just very quickly. So it started, it's actually quite funny, you know, now being in 2021 and all of these things, we've been through lots of stuff, but especially in America, and the rising of the Black Lives Matter movement, and, you know, something that not only, you know, really hit me for obvious reasons, but because, you know, there were protests, like a constant stream of protests going past my apartment for about 2 weeks. And, you know, to the extent where we felt as though we had to run out to join them, even in a pandemic. It was, you know, it just felt like something that, you know, was not only historical, but very living, something that I was living very real in the moment. But sort of up until that point, I felt as though the only way I could express, you know, any sort of Black culture in my music without it becoming a controversial issue was to kind of hide it in, to hide it. And so I, you know, might put a spiritual or a slave song transcribed into a music box, and people would think, oh, what a lovely, pretty tune, you know. And I was like, well, actually, it carries huge significance. And so I was kind of using it as a polarizing technique. And I'm kind of still doing that with music boxes. But in this case, it had extended a bit for various reasons to do with Handel's Messiah, and that's why Louise is actually humming a spiritual over the top of that tune of Handel. So
yeah, it's kind of, I mean, I've only just heard you say that for the first time, Hannah, but again, sorry, I'll just bring it back up. It's interesting. My immediate response and interest is that you kind of reversed it here, that there's this Western music that's stuck into this music box, and she's humming and singing this spiritual, which really is, I mean, it's a very visceral thing when a performer sings. I have to admit to you, oh, this is going to be recorded on YouTube, isn't it? I mean, it's not just Louise. All of our string players find singing terrifying. And it is often the string players that get asked to sing. We've just performed a piece for singing string trio, for example, from Anna Corson, and these, it is often that. But I think, well, I mean, I think it's incredibly effective in the performance, and Louise does it brilliantly. Oh, sorry, go ahead, Anna.
Oh, I was just going to say thank you. And also it's really interesting because I sensed, I hope she doesn't mind me saying, but I sensed that she was quite nervous about it and had sought advice from Sarah, who's, obviously, singer with Riot, but it was just actually wonderful. And it's not about the perfection of the, the sound, even though it was perfect, but it's, about the intention and what comes from, blending together those two worlds, really. So yeah.
Yeah, it's a fascinating thing to record. I mean, I was involved in producing this piece because so often when you're recording, especially with our musicians, we're spending every minute to get every single thing exactly right. And here it was not. I mean, Louise really took great care and was coming back to the booth to listen. Did I sing that pitch correctly? Did I sing that pitch correctly? But understanding that maybe this isn't exactly the most important thing in the music went a long way towards the final performance. Anna, hopefully, I still have you there. I don't see you on my screen actually, but she's here, isn't she? She was just here. There you are. I just had to maximize it. Yes, and you've moved. So we're going to hope that the Wi-Fi sticks, because a question has just come in specifically for you. This makes my job so easy. I'm just going to read it. So, Anna. I'm still sharing my screen, aren't I? Well, why don't we bring your piece here? And we can say, you wrote a piece about the formation of the universe and beginning of life. So I'm interested in what the challenges of putting that into 5 minutes of music were. Easy question.
Thank you for
Away
the
you go.
No, it's hit the nail on the head. It's quite a satirical title, really, in one sense, and in another sense it's very serious. I think the satirical side is that, when you get commissioned to write a 5-minute piece, you think, oh, what shall I put in the 5-minute piece? And actually all of my esteemed colleagues here have put huge concepts into their pieces. It doesn't matter that it's a short piece. They've put really amazingly deep philosophical, scientific, conceptual things into their pieces. So ironically, it's just that mine's about time, so I suppose it seems more obvious somehow, but in another sense it's a very simple piece. I think I'm sort of taking the mick out myself because I really like to do very philosophical pieces, and I like science as well, but I'm not a scientist. So I also noticed that the saxophone has got a huge repertoire of pieces about space. Something about the sound of that instrument, composers love writing about space, and they love writing, they give it titles like solar, interstellar, omnisphere, black hole,
I'm just
nebula.
It's going to go change the names of my solo saxophone pieces here. I'll be right back.
Well, it's great, but it works so well. I think it actually, saxophone in space is a great combination. So I thought, well, actually, why not go with that rather than against it, and just continue the great tradition of writing space music with the saxophone, especially when you're using multiphonics. I think what was brilliant about working with Amy was that she very patiently and carefully explained all sorts of things to me that I didn't know, like how to choose the best multiphonics, which ones were better quiet, which ones were better loud, that kind of thing. And after being playing with all those sounds for her, I thought, it does sound spacey, I'm going to go for that. And then, just going back to the question, I wanted to do a piece that kind of was a sort of party piece without being too wild. I hope it's something that Amy can use as an encore piece or in concerts if she wants to. Hopefully it's quite accessible, and it does use extended techniques, but I think because it's like painting a picture of something, hopefully it's quite easy to grasp for an audience, and I hope it will have a 13.8 billion year life as a piece. So that was another reason for that. It's just like, I'm just sort of taking the mick out myself, really, that you can't possibly put all that into 5 minutes. But then at the same time, if you get really philosophical, what is time? And when you're experiencing music, time sort of disappears, really.
Yeah, I mean, I have to say, it really, I don't know how many of our members have had a chance to listen, but it really is, a couple of the Zeitgeist pieces have come in like this, like just extraordinarily simple but very, very clear ideas and very, very powerful. And Amy's a performer like that. When she stands on a stage, she just like holds the stage, and you can just watch her say anything. It's absolutely amazing. And recording it in the beautiful.
Yeah,
Sorry,
just to
go ahead, Anna.
No, sorry. Just earlier when I was being a robot and disappearing, I'm so sorry about that. I was trying to say that really my pieces always come from the people that I'm working with. So yeah, exactly what you just said about Amy, her presence and her skill. I wanted to create something that used her range of skills and was something that hopefully she would really enjoy playing. And she does it so dramatically and clearly and beautifully. So I'm really pleased with that. Yeah, sorry, I interrupted you.
That's good. I'm sure I was not saying anything. I've already forgotten whatever I was talking about. But I think mostly just saying how much I loved your piece. I think it's very interesting
Thank you.
what you mention about the performer becoming a protagonist. I mean, in the sense that Amy's like kind of strength of character there, it's something that you see. I mean, we've now released, I guess, almost 25 of these solo pieces, and it's very, the solo nature kind of naturally makes the performer a protagonist. I guess, Tonia, in your piece, actually, both in Tonia and Matthew's pieces, you have this kind of shadow, as it were, in that. In Tonia's piece, it's not really the bass clarinet that is the protagonist. Is that a fair statement, Tonia? What do you?
Yeah, no. That makes sense. I guess what the bass clarinet is doing for me, if I think about it, is that it's kind of amplifying and accentuating and highlight. Yeah, it feels like it kind of amplifies the music of the protagonist. It amplifies different aspects of my mother's voice, and heightens your experience of it, because it makes more obvious because it's there's sections where it's doubling her voice exactly with all the little intonations, and there's something about that just like makes it like big. I don't know how to describe it. Yeah, like something happens, and then there's points where the bass clarinet splits off and starts to play multiphonics that are rooted in notes that already exist in Ma's voice, and then start to play off some of the story, and gets more textural in some points. Like there's a point where she's about to cross a bridge, and the bass clarinet then becomes a kind of it starts to evoke some of the textures of the world around her. There's some gunfire and stuff, and so there's like some bits there that get accentuated. So yeah, it's not a protagonist, but it's like it's breathing in the same way as the protagonist is, or something. Like it's with her the whole time.
It's a beautiful way of putting it. I mean, I guess then, Matthew, in your piece, there's this sense, in a sense, like Sam is, breathing with is almost the wrong word here, because Sam is really, he's got a click. So people who don't know, we send an electronic track back to Sam, which tells him exactly when he has to play, and Matthew and Sam have all.
There's actually no click.
There's no click.
No, because it's all. I think people might be under the impression that the video part and the music are kind of put together afterwards. But I've built a max patch where this drum that he's using has a kind of practice pad on it, which is Sam's own practice pad. And it's what he practices on every day. And the piece kind of explores his neuroses around these physical habits he had developed. So I thought, okay, well, I'll try and make this kind of banal, thwacky sounding drum kind of a bit more magical. So he hits that, and then the max patch receives an impulse and sends out a synth tone and a little segment of his pre-recorded voice. But because it's not to click, it means it can be more kind of temporally expressive. It doesn't have to be completely locked into a grid.
Okay. So that's fascinating in that he's actually controlling the way and the kind of deployment of those things.
Exactly. Yeah. But in terms of him being the protagonist, I mean, I've been quite interested in this idea of like documentary techniques and self-reflexivity in my music. And I thought, like, to put that onto Sam, who is performing it, I mean, it is a piece all about Sam in a way, and the things he was going through. And I guess we were trying to navigate a place where it felt kind of cathartic, but at the same time is looking on itself fairly self-deprecatingly and with a bit of levity. But yeah, it's difficult to kind of balance. You were talking about the instrument being the protagonist. In this sense, the instrument is, of course, very important because Sam has been working through these physiological issues he's been having with that practice pad. It's been his kind of main method. So that becomes the vehicle with which he can retell his story.
Okay. And so Matthew draws an interesting distinction there that I guess we could, if we imagine going back to Tonia's piece with the bitones, in a sense, with that being the heart of the piece, the instrument really is the kind of protagonist in a really physical sense, in the sense that, like, this is the thing. Now, Tonia, an interesting thing about this piece, or an interesting question that I'd have for you, would this piece work in a concert hall? Does it make sense as a question? Because we were so happy when we were recording it that we could, like, take a microphone and stick it right there and really, and it's like, okay, you can really hear this. Whereas if it's, you know, if Stephen's doing one of his solo recitals at the Royal Albert Hall again, and we've all just bought our tickets up in the cheap seats, it's harder to project something like that across a space. Is that fair? Do you agree? You disagree?
I think many of my pieces do end up kind of on this boundary because I am so interested in the instrument as an object and finding kind of new sounds that tend not to project in kind of a traditional way. I think it's possible. It would just have to be played quite differently. And also it would be an experience where there might be some elements that are not audible, but that they are visual, that the performer is still playing. Yeah, I think I was just thinking about what Matthew said about, or what the previous discussion about protagonists and performers, and trying to think, kind of apply that concept to this piece. And yeah, I guess at its heart is the instrument as an object, being the protagonist, but it's, and that is very specific to this piece. It's kind of all about, like, well, yeah, the instrument, but also I think it really is an encapsulation of, like, my own personal stress of being in lockdown. And it kind of encapsulates my experience of, like, just playing on my little ukulele at home, not for anyone, not, you know, because of anyone. But then, you know, the fact that Stephen did kind of sympathize with the experience of stress and, like, the tension as well. I think, yeah, being a protagonist, I think, you know, there's kind of a process of empathy that happens where, you know, the more specific the goals are in the creative process, and how it does kind of naturally lend itself to a more, you know, maybe universal interpretations of these, like, tiny, minute things.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Do you think the piece could be amplified if it was performed?
I think if I wanted amplification, I would have written it as such, and then it would actually be a very different piece. Soothe the Tooth is definitely for acoustic viola, and, you know, like any other piece, there are limitations on, you know, how and where you can perform it. So I think definitely in kind of a chamber concert setting, it would be appropriate. Yeah, I mean, you wouldn't put a solo viola piece maybe on, you know, the hugest stage possible anyway.
Yeah, I think I was rather hyperbolic there, but yeah, that is that's great. Now, it maybe it's a it can be dangerous when you bring 6 very different artists together to start reading every piece through this one lens of like, okay, well, let's talk about the protagonist and let's talk about those things. I've just been, I didn't actually know this about your music before, Heloise, but this phrase that you said at the beginning, or when you're introducing your music, that you're interested in non-human life and exploring that through sound. I kind of want to just give that to you as a question, like how does that interact with these kinds of ideas, and how did it work in your piece?
Yeah, I think, well, firstly, working with the idea of the tree as an animate life form, and this idea that was proposed by Tuck Tyrrell Yates, who was the source for the tree root recordings, which were played through the piano strings. So those are from the roots of spruce trees in Washington State, and his theory was that these acoustic emissions, so they're in the between 20 and 90 hertz, they're sounds that are kind of caused by the tree roots taking up water, and the kind of micro bubbles in the xylem in the tree kind of pumping and giving these pops. He was proposing that these sounds are ways that the trees communicate through the rhizosphere through the ground to all the different trees in the area, and are used to kind of share information. So yeah, and then the idea of I suppose in this piece, the protagonist is the piano, because the research started because I discovered that you know, the piano soundboard, which is made of spruce, in the higher frequencies of the piano, the tree root rings are close together, and in the lower they're wider apart, and this is due to the rate of growth of the tree. So yeah, I just trying to find ways in which to bring that data basically to life, and to kind of bring us closer to being with this other being and kind of understanding it in kind of more human terms. And I suppose that's where Adam comes in, is as the translator of that. Yeah, don't know if that answers the question.
Well, I think it's a wonderful answer to the question, and it's so interesting, all these various approaches to this one kind of problem task to write a piece for someone that's going to appear online first. And not only because, of course, we will be performing these solo pieces live at Huddersfield this year. Is anybody, are any of the composers here thinking about changing their piece at all, making revision? I mean, normally you'd have a chance to work. Okay, so Matthew's hand is up immediately. So what's happening? Tell us what's happening in that's going to change.
Well, I guess just because the piece is quite like metatextual and refers back to itself all the time, I think now we're both quite keen for the piece to comment on the online presentation and the first kind of, and its reception maybe, and to kind of incorporate what has happened since that. How has Sam's addiction to risk changed since the premiere? All of these little things. So I think we need to kind of think what will freshen it up, especially when kind of dramaturgically a lot of the hit points in the piece might not have the same impact if we kept them the same. So it does need to change, I think, to have the same sort of impact.
That's very interesting, and I'm looking forward to seeing what comes of it. Also to how we solve video projection and all these things in a real space, which may actually be easier than it was on the video.
Yeah, I think so. I think it probably will be quite easy, just ping it on the back, ping it on a wall.
Put it somewhere.
Yeah.
Put it on. I'm wondering, Tonia, do you feel your piece? I'm just hoping that this is a fair question. Will your piece change when it's in a concert hall? I thought it was really wonderful when I first saw your video, and it felt like this is a authentic place for a performance like this. And I suddenly thought, well, yeah, I'm really glad we didn't record this on the stage at King's Place. Not that it wouldn't work as a concert piece, but how do you? I mean, we haven't had any conversation about that yet, about where we're going to perform it or how we're going to do it. But I'm interested in putting you on the spot here for all eternity with an answer.
Well, I'm quite excited. I haven't thought about it, you know, but I'm quite excited about the prospect of that being a consideration every time, and working out interesting ways of presenting it in different spaces. The space that we captured that performance in has a very special quality and a lovely natural acoustic. An act of filming it then encouraged me and also led me to include subtitles. So that is another thing that is kind of another addition to it that I think Hannah touched on, this kind of how the conditions mean that something that would normally get it's a one-off performance suddenly is we're creating it's got, how to say, it's like manifests in a different way. We're finding another way of manifesting it, and each performance will be a different version of it. It won't be that film. So I'm quite excited about figuring out how that might be, how that might come about. But yeah, I could definitely see it working in a hall, and I'm quite excited about the idea of my mum's voice booming out across different spaces in different parts of the world. And yeah, I think that feels quite exciting and interesting, thinking about how text and voice and instrument can work in space in different ways.
Well, we're excited to be back in the audience and to be hearing it. Well, I mean, thank you all so much for being here. There's only one question left in the Q&A, which I'm going to answer here, because it is a question for me. It's not a question for one of our composers that I'm going to steal. But I say that because if there are any other HCMF members who have their question and they're thinking, should I ask it? Is there going to be times that we have a couple minutes here. So if someone has a question they're dying to ask, then please do type it in and we'll get to it. Mick asks, Riot Ensemble performances and repertoire is very innovative and often slightly crazy. Thanks, Mick. That's great. And I'd like to ask what you look for in the musicians you hire. So firstly, I have to say that unfortunately, I don't just have the power of hiring and firing everybody at the ensemble. It's not quite an episode of The Apprentice as much as I'd like it to be. But what I would say is that the ensemble built quite organically over about 5-6 years. And I can remember when each of these performers that we've been kind of referencing tonight who played these pieces, and in fact, each of the performers in Riot Ensemble first played with the ensemble, or when I first heard them play, when I first interacted with them. I'll give you 2 examples. Sam Wilson, the percussionist. Actually, the first time I met Sam, I met him at Aldborough Music when he was there on the Young Musicians course, and I was teaching some week-long class. And he was already one of the most exciting and best musicians I'd ever met. And I just thought, I really, really want to work with this guy. And we founded Riot at Guildhall, where Sam did his undergraduate, and we got him in for those first gigs. Then he disappeared for 2 years, went and became a worldwide hip-hop sensation with his comedy act, and did all sorts of other things, plays in Anna Meredith's band, and does all this other stuff. But I got him, I finally got him and got him back in the ensemble playing, and was thrilled. And I think the thing I would say about each of the performers in the ensemble, what I'm always looking for are performers who want to help composers explore and express all the things that you've been hearing the composers express tonight. So it might be an even more interesting question just in this group to ask, well, how did you pick these 6 composers? It's not, these aren't the 6 composers that would just like fall on a hat out of a line. We didn't have a call for scores. And the answer is, well, these composers bubbled up to the surface. Some through Graham, composers that Huddersfield had been interested in or whose work had featured there before. And the others, actually not through myself, not through me like saying, oh, that composer, but instead through a performer saying, I heard this, and this composer is really interesting to me, and this is someone who I think has something to say, and this is someone who I'd be interested in getting on a Zoom call with every other day and discussing bitones, or getting on WhatsApp and throwing recordings back and forth about transcribing a song from however long ago, or being asked to sing and play a whistle and give a really dramatic performance on the cello, because that is what this music is about, whether we're in a pandemic or not. This connection of artists who are coming together to speak better together than they would individually, for me, is just everything about what Riot is. And that's what I look for. That's what I look for in musicians. That's what I look for in composers. I can only say to these 6 composers, your work has deeply, deeply affected me. Recording it and seeing it has made me stop, pause in my own practice, think about what I want to make, think about what I want to see, what I want to spend my time listening to when we come out of all this. And I'm really grateful for it. I'm really grateful that we got to be a part of your au revoirs, as it were, and to make music together during this kind of crazy, nightmarish, but also in some ways very beautiful time. So thank you all. Thank you for being here. This is like last chance for questions. Kind of like tick, 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 tick. All right, so we'll wrap it up there. Thanks again to each of the composers. Let's also just say thanks to Graham, thanks to Tamsin, the work they do at Huddersfield, the work that they did this year, like putting together a festival, bringing a festival off in unbelievably difficult times, everything that they do to support, real new music in the UK. We would be so much poorer without it. And to you, the HCMF members, because without your support, HCMF just would not exist the way it does, and some of these pieces would not have happened. And as I've just said, I think that all of us would be really poor for that. So thank you to everyone. And with that, I say good night. I am turning off my microphone.
Thank you.
Thanks very much.
Thanks, Aaron.
Big thanks.
Thanks, everyone.